I wanted to get in a comment here about the whole January 6th thing because so many people are confused by that. You'll notice that the mainstream talking heads have shifted things around so that they're calling it the January 6th insurrection, though it was by no means an insurrection within the meaning and the intent of the insurrection law.
Good to know.
Okay? The insurrection law was adopted early on, 1790 something, to prevent groups that were trying to split off and do their own thing and were armed groups, people that were actually going to come shoot up the Capitol or, kill congressmen and that sort of thing. That's why we have the insurrection law that allows the government to defend itself. However, what happened on January 6th was not an insurrection from our viewpoint under the law that was designed for those kinds of insurrections. What happened in January 6th was that a whole bunch of, I hate to say it, but a whole bunch of ignorant Americans trespassed into Washington, D.C., which is an international city-state. It's not just another little, community. It's a separate government, a separate country, in effect. And they all went storming in there thinking it was their capital when it's not. Okay? So they went to this foreign country and they swaggered around and they caused a disturbance. And they ran through monuments and crashed gates and whatnot, like vandals. There wasn't the kind of violence that an insurrection, an armed insurrection, I mean, you're talking about people going out and buying a tank and, but no, what went on in Washington, D.C. on January 6th was what I would call a fairly quiet riot. They weren't even throwing Molotov cocktails. They weren't, throwing smoke bombs. I mean, this was people that were acting pretty much within the bounds of a protest of any kind that's ever gone on in this country. And especially, you'll notice the difference between the hideous, widespread urban riots that they promoted the year before, and why that wasn't called an insurrection, and so why nobody took action against that, and why the billions of dollars of property damage, both private and public, was never addressed by any court anywhere in this country is amazing to me. And yet this rather quiet riot that didn't involve armed people going around shooting each other and didn't involve anybody shooting anyone in Congress, though God knows they probably deserved it, how they can call that an insurrection within the meaning of the law is ridiculous. They can't. And yet the talking heads are going, oh, the January 6th insurrection. Well, how about the June 20th Minneapolis insurrection? How about the August 15th Portland insurrection? How about, if you want to talk about insurrection with property damage and lives lost and people threatened and arson and all sorts of stuff that went on prior to this, and they're calling this an insurrection, well, I'll tell you how they're getting around it. It's because it's in Washington, D.C. It's their definition of an insurrection, not our definition of an insurrection. And you have to remember that in Washington, D.C., the members of Congress are the literal government of that separate country that's sitting there perched on our shores. So what the members of Congress say is the law, and whatever they adopt as the municipal law, is what goes in Washington, D.C. So when you are crossing into the boundary of Washington, D.C., it's like you are crossing into Holland or France or China, wherever, Washington, D.C. is a foreign enclave. And you can see where the District of Columbia was created as a foreign enclave. And then within the District of Columbia law, how the municipality was set aside. So if you look at your Constitution and go to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, you'll see the Enclave Clause, which creates this separate government for a separate, essentially a separate country within our country, the District of Columbia, which is not a state. And then within the district law, you'll find that they set aside the municipality of Washington, D.C. as their headquarters, and their municipal government is the Congress. So, members of the Congress serving as a municipal government for Washington, D.C. concoct the municipal code. And this is what I'm talking about when I tell you that they've got this humongous big, big fat law books like this thick that comprise the municipal code for Washington, D.C. as a separate international city-state. And if you go to my book and you look up Disclosure 101, in the first few pages, I give you the actual citation of the municipal code, at least circa their 1989 edition, where they actually create the municipal corporate person named after you. So that stands against them as evidence of what they've done.
Very good. Thank you for that explanation. I think that would be helpful to those who are representing the people that were involved in that incident.
Right. Well, you have to look at the municipal code to see what you're being charged under. And it costs you like $1,800 to get a copy of their municipal code. It's expensive, and it's a big, it's a series of volumes of legislation that they have specifically passed to administer their foreign municipal government, which is squatting here on our soil and causing us all these troubles.
Part of the mess that has to be cleaned up.
Well, right, because people who innocently think that Washington, D.C. is their capital and that they can, go there and expect that the Constitution is going to be honored are in for a big surprise and a big lesson in constitutional law that allowed this to happen. And you have to go back in the history and realize that when they set this up, the founders were thinking in terms of, well, the Congress is trustworthy. And the Congress they were thinking of was our Congress, our Continental Congress. We're the ones that are supposed to be making the rules for the municipality of Washington, D.C. through our Congress, not their Congress. Okay, so the founding fathers, when they set this up, set it up so that the members of our Congress would be setting up the government for the municipality. And what they intended is that the municipality, the city of Washington, D.C., would be a common ground with all 50 states having their voice in its governance to maintain neutrality, so that representatives from all 50 states could come to Washington, D.C. in safety and could conduct their business peacefully. So there was a very good reason that the founders had for setting it up that way. But it has gone astray because our Congress has not met since the Civil War. And so the municipal government has usurped in and has taken over the municipality, and the entire put together of the municipal government has been handled by our subcontractors instead of by us.
And the foxes are watching the hen house, and
Again.
yeah, again.
So you see, like Rod Class, you all remember Rod Class? Rod is a person who has studied the federal code to the extreme. And I said to him one day, Rod, why do you study federal code to such an extreme when it's not even your government? And I could see it kind of go, boing. You know, it was like taking a marble, launching it on his forehead and watching it go fly off. And unfortunately, that's the response I get. Anyway, Rod didn't get what I was trying to tell him.
Right.
That this is a separate government. It's a, run under a foreign law, and it's, you're basically dealing with two corporations that are quite renegade. He didn't get it. And so he told me before he went to Washington, D.C., what he was going to do. He was going to just take his deer rifle in a rack and in his pickup truck, and go to Washington, D.C. as the citizen, right? I said, don't do that. That's dumb. That's like, going into France, where they've openly, publicly declared that guns are illegal in France, and you're just going to take a gun into France, and you think that you're going to get away with this, that this is not going to cause trouble? Well, they have to obey by the Constitution. Well, they have to obey the Constitution out here in our states, on our land, right? But they don't have to obey the Constitution within the parameters of their independent international city-state. They have to kind of keep in line with what the intent of creating that international city-state was. But if they want to have a gun ban, they can do that pretty much the same way that Dodge City could create a gun ban back in the 18 whatevers. And I told him that before he went. He went, he got arrested, he got dragged through all sorts of crap in their courts, he was convicted, he was sent to jail, he came out, and it was all that expense, all that energy, all the potential got wasted on something that, if we had a correct evaluation of the situation, the parties involved in the problem, we would never do. I mean, knowing what I know about Washington, D.C., and what I'm telling you, would you go take a gun into Washington, D.C.?
I wouldn't even go. I wouldn't even go to DC.
No, it's not our capital. It's not anything that we need to be involved in. What we need to do is enforce the constitutions on the principles responsible. And that's the Pope, the Lord Mayor, and the King at this point. So, whatever happens with all this January 6th nonsense, don't be surprised if all those people get the book thrown at them by the cretins like Nancy Pelosi who are standing there as the plenary government of Washington, D.C. Now, things may be somewhat ameliorated because the Republicans got control of the House of Representatives, and Nancy has been replaced. So the chief witch in charge is gone as of January. But, they're trying to push this whole thing forward so fast, every way they can, to get some big publicity stunt out of, sending these poor people to jail for 100 years under municipal law that should not apply to them. And yet, because they trespassed into Washington, D.C. and broke municipal law, they're being held, they're being, treated like crap, they're being hunted, they're being brought forward as criminals, as insurrectionists against what? The municipal government of Washington, D.C., which is a foreign government. I ask you again, what does it have to do with the price of beans in China? What it means is that we've allowed our country to run dangerously astray for a long time. And we have to wake up. We have to do our duty, our public duty, because face it, the constitutions may be public contracts in the sense that they are public knowledge, but in order to enforce them, who has the enforcement capacity?
We do.
The states of the union. The states of the union are the employers, and all of these federal entities are the employees. So if you want to gain control of the situation, you have to bring forward the state assemblies. And that's what we're doing.
That's what
The
we've
only
done.
parties to the constitutions that have the ability to enforce the constitutions are the states of the union. And the only bodies that represent the states of the union at this time are our state assemblies. Now, once we get things pushed beyond this point and we clean up all this housekeeping that's left after 150 years of being dead asleep, like Rip Van Winkle, okay, we can have our Congress, we can call our Continental Congress together, and we can address a lot more things. But we have to build this in an organic fashion. Just as a baby begins as a fetus, begins as a newborn, begins as a little creepy crawler and then gets up and walks, we have this progress. We have this process that we have to go through in order to become truly strong enough and competent enough to do all that needs to be done. And we can start, but at this point, we've been limited to doing roll call votes of our state assemblies instead of acting as a Congress. And the convenience of a Congress should not be underestimated, so long as the people that are delegates know the law, know what they're doing, and are committed to the cause of this country. Now, it's going to take us a while to fully educate and bring together that kind of an august body to conduct business for all the states. However, we can start by being our own best selves in the assemblies and realizing the sacred duty that now rests upon us and nobody else. One of the most frustrating and yet revealing parts of this entire experience for me was talking to the members of the Vatican. And, basically they said, well, it's your own fault. Nobody stopped you from getting organized. Nobody stopped you from studying your own history. It's your own government. You're supposed to be self-governing. And you fall down on the job and then you blame everybody else. What can you say? It's 100% truth. We are supposed to be self-governing. And it is also true that nobody else could actually do for us what we need to do for ourselves. You know, you've got the states who hold one end of the contract, and you've got the subcontractors, the principals of the subcontractors that hold the other end of the contract. What do? Expect them to enforce our side? Even if they wanted to, even if it was to their advantage to, they couldn't. So there's been one very, very important missing element in all of this disaster, and that is us, the Americans, the American states, and our state assemblies. And that's why you cannot overestimate the value of what you're doing as members of the state assemblies, or the importance of what you're doing. As inconvenient as roll call votes are, roll call votes work. And when you've got a lawful, seated, fully declared state assembly, the power that that state assembly holds is literally mind-numbing. Okay? They have not been able to enforce their claims against us and against all the people who received the shots as property because our state assemblies got busy early on and declared it illegal. Now, you know, when you look at this and you say, oh, given a choice between allowing my son and my daughter to be claimed as public property because they got a shot and having all their rights and their inheritance stripped away from them because they got a shot, or not allowing this and declaring it unlawful and illegal, well, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? Who would go along with it? Nobody in their right mind would go along with this. Nobody who was thinking would allow a living human being, and I'm saying that a little bit wrong, but no one would allow a man or a woman to be redefined as a genetically modified organism and claimed as property under a patent. And we didn't. We saw that and we said no. And we had the standing, the political status, and the right to do that. So you may have noticed that a bunch of big companies have been going bankrupt. And you may have noticed that a lot of CEOs have been stepping down from their positions, including Mr. Bourla, the Pfizer CEO. Bye-bye. You want to know why? Because they didn't get the big one. They didn't get the Americans. And the reason they didn't get the Americans as property is that our state assemblies said no. We were on the job. Now, we're going to be having another major roll call vote here pretty soon. And that is involving the definition of an American gold dollar. Now, dollars have always been described in our country in terms of silver. You know, we've had $50 gold pieces and that sort of thing. But now we're contemplating an entirely new kind of currency, which is a dollar bill that actually has gold embedded in it. Okay, so it's up to us to define a dollar. a new American dollar. And we hope to have all of the specifics of this together to present to everybody very soon that would allow us then to mint American Federation dollars in gold. Okay? Now we are attaching, if you will, our silver dollars as our, the original United States silver dollars. Those are all ours. And we want to retain them, right? But we also want to mint new silver dollars. So we have to make a distinction between American Federation dollars, this new currency, which are bills with gold embedded in them, and the silver currency, which is our traditional precious metals currency. And I'm hoping to have a description of everything in the process and exactly what does it look like, how much gold of what purity, those sorts of things for weights and measures and standards purposes, ready to send to the American state assemblies for a roll call vote authorizing this as a weight and standard. So you have to establish the weights, measures, purities, that sort of thing in order to define the currency. So before we can issue an American Federation dollar, we have to fully define it and we have to agree upon it. And so we will be taking a roll call vote of the state assemblies, and we will be carrying through on that. At which point you can start denominating your current fiat currency in terms of the American Federation gold dollar or in terms of the silver dollar. You'll have both. Now, generally speaking, our tradition is that the silver has been our domestic currency for use between Terry and I, and gold would be the standard between Terry and King Charles.
Right?
Gold has been our international, and in that sense, okay, this is always a little tricky for us to talk about national, international, and what that is about, because when we're just talking among ourselves or we're talking to someone from some other country, it's such common parlance for us to describe ourselves as Americans. Someone asks you, well, where do you come from? America. Oh, what are you? Oh, I'm an American. Okay. But really, American is a very general term. It can apply to anybody in this hemisphere. And we don't actually take our nationality as Americans. We take our nationality as part of the population of our State of the Union. So if you want to get technical about it, I'm a Wisconsinite by birth. And I'm not, generally speaking, am I an American? Yeah, well, I come from this hemisphere. Am I a North American? Yeah, but that could mean Mexico, Canada, or the United States. You see, and the same sort of thing applies with interstate and international. Okay, let's very briefly go over that. And I'm going to do a Granobites about it, so if you miss anything, don't worry. But you have what are called nation states. Each one of our states are nation states. The nation is the population. The nation is the people. the state is the physically defined land and soil and surface water and what we experience as the state. Okay, it's physical. So we have nation states. When we go out there and we start talking about international, however, the understanding is normally a situation like France and Germany. Here in this country, it's West Virginia and Virginia. Okay? So actually, we are like Europe, and the only thing that keeps us from being 50 little countries is the union that we formed very early in our existence that allows us to act as one country, even though we're actually 50 countries. All right, so there's something called the Interstate Commerce Clause that I really want to bring your attention to. And remember this little factoid about international and interstate. In our case, when we talk about international or interstate, they are completely interchangeable words because of what I just explained to you, that each state is its own country. And so you could say it's international for us to trade between New York and Alaska, or you could say it's interstate and it's trade between New York and Alaska, okay? The Interstate Commerce Clause in the Constitution allows the federal government to regulate interstate commerce, okay? So broadly speaking, in our case, that means international commerce. And the thing to focus on is the word commerce. Commerce is business between two incorporated entities, like between GM and Raytheon. Okay? That's commerce. Two business entities that are both incorporated is commerce. Now, do you and I and Terry engage in commerce? Are we corporations? No. Even though they try to say that our board of directors is sitting in Washington, D.C., wink, wink. And that's how they propose to regulate us and regulate our business dealings and, you know, stare in and surveil our bank accounts and our credit cards. And, you know, what do we spend money on and how many cans of beans did we buy this week? Is by abuse of the Interstate Commerce Clause. So anyway, getting back to what we were talking about, the tradition of using silver as our domestic currency among the states and using gold for our currency outside the perimeters of the United States is still valid. However, other countries that want to do business with us may want gold. And so we need to be able to produce gold-bearing coinage or bills that have a certain specific amount of gold in them so that these other countries can take that currency and go, okay, that's valid, that's good faith, we'll accept that. See, the way that we stand to be really hurt in this country is if we have no precious metals backed currency sufficient for our needs. So that's why we're addressing this now, and that's why we will soon be sending it out for the individual state assemblies to consider the definition of our currency, our new currency.
That's very exciting.
It is. It is. And a lot of this is very exciting. And I want to draw everybody's attention this Christmas season that Pope Francis did liquidate both of the municipal corporations doing business as US Inc. and USA Inc. All right. And we just need a whole bunch more of that. We need a whole bunch of these corporations liquidated. We need Monsanto liquidated. We need Bayer liquidated. And that's not even an American company, that's a German company. We need BlackRock liquidated. We need some of these banks liquidated. And that kind of specific argument that they have conducted unlawful activities has got to be made through the right organizations and through the right channels. It has to be brought forward and the complaint has to be substantiated. So we are close now, I think, in a very general sense of having established the culpability of most of the big pharma vaccine manufacturers and test makers in multiple countries. Some of those corporations are reachable under international law, and some are not. But we can get started. And as we start the process of taking out these franchises for unlawful acts, the word is going to spread that the public law is not dead, and the people are not ignorant, and life is not threatened by profiteers. We are not going to put up with it. And a lot of times you'll find in history, it's all about what people will put up with without taking action, without defending yourself. If you defend yourselves and you defend your lives and you defend the sanctity of life, then at a certain point, those who are trying to harm you step back and go, you know, we could get hurt doing this. And we're just now beginning to see a lot of doctors who are on the take and who are shooting everybody up with this crap, realizing that, oh my God, they're dying like flies. What are we going to do? We're culpable. Yes. That $26,000 per person that you vaccinated that you were getting a kickback on. Yep, buddy, you were murdering for profit. And it doesn't matter if you were ordered to do it by your CEO, because your CEO has no ability to remove the public law against murder. You know? So these corporations are the ones on the grill. And they're the ones we have to take out. We don't have to take out all of them. I assure you that all we need are enough cases so that they will get the message. And part of that is already taking place. It's not taking place on the same grounds and on the same level that I'm talking about. But already there have been some very successful, very well thought out lawsuits that have begun the process of holding these corporations accountable. What I'm talking about, however, is a wholesale destruction of corporations that have done this so that they not only don't profit by it, but their board members are charged with the crimes. That's when you really start to get traction. That's when you finally get the corporatists' attention. Because until then, they're just passing the cost of all this on to their clients. You know, you go in there and you slap Pfizer around and you say, oh, you did this, you did that, you caused this damage, blah, blah, blah. You see it on late night TV all the time, right? Oh, if you were at Camp Lejeune and you know, had bad drinking water, join this lawsuit. It's a class action lawsuit. Or if you took, you know, what Zantac, if you took Zantac and you suffered these problems, then call this hotline and join this lawsuit against the manufacturer. If you had a hernia mesh that didn't work out, if you had a birth control device inserted that caused you all sorts of ghastly problems, you know, here are all these different numbers you can call, all these lawsuits that are against these big companies. Well, what do those big companies do? What's the real problem with corporations? This is a 10-point question, class. What's the big problem with corporations?
No accountability because of the corporate veil.
Well, they not only have the corporate veil. What happens when you fine them $10 billion?
They pass it on.
They pass it on to their clients.
Mm-hmm.
They add to inflation.
Yep.
They don't care. It doesn't hurt them. It hurts you. It's like, you know, you're standing there and you're pounding on your own toe. It just doesn't matter to them, you know. Oh, you know, hey, George, we got fined another $1 billion for that drug that wasn't really safe, but, you know, we'll just pass it on to the customers of the next wonder drug that we are allowed to foist off on the public like snake oil salesmen. Okay? You cannot fine a corporation without it just passing on the cost of it to its customers. And if you're their customers, then guess what? You're just doing this grand circle jerk. You don't want to, all right, I'll rephrase that. You do want to be able to slap corporations on the hand. You do want to have minor regulatory ways of correcting them without destroying them. But there comes a time when their destruction is mandated by the public law and by moral issues that cannot be denied. Now, we haven't had any real antitrust action by the government or any other moving party since the Reagan administration. And it's long, long overdue. But don't expect Joe Biden to do anything. I mean, he's useless. He has no power. He's nobody. So what has to be done is a destruction of these corporations at the level of the principals responsible for them. And they need to be taken out. I don't mean left standing with a, you know, $1 billion fine. I mean taken out, like the garbage. And the people involved need to be made big examples of. Not small examples, big examples, hanging examples. Anyone who would do what they've done with these vaccines and with these mandates and all this other bullshit for the sake of making a few $1 billion of profit deserves to be, they deserve the full fury of the public and of the public law. And so these corporations need to go. They don't need to be, you know, hand slapped. They need to be totally destroyed so that there is no Pfizer. There is no Monsanto. There is no Bayer. There is none of this anymore. And whatever they once had, it needs to be cut up and parceled out, sold off to other more responsible organizations in the same business sector. And that needs to stand for all time as a warning to corporatists for what happens to your corporations when you go, you know, when you lose your moral compass and become murderers. Now, I'm sorry that it's come to that, but it has. And these corporations need to continue to get it slapped in their face like a half-frozen halibut every time that they get out of line. Now, who do we have to do that? What institutions do we have that are legally, morally, and ethically obligated to do this? Well, if you're waiting for the DOJ, you'll wait a long, cold day because their actual job is to defend these corporations. They're using our money to defend these corporations against us. Isn't that sweet? And the Congress has been allowed to get away with this since the late 1890s. They have their entire whole in-house legal staff to protect them from complaints made by their employers at their employer's expense. Meanwhile, their employers stand here being imposed upon, being falsely addressed, being bullied and racketeered against by our employees. Well, I don't know about you folks, but this is one old great grandma that's sick and tired of it. And I want to go hunting some corporations this year. I want to put the bite on them so hard that they have nothing left to say. And all the people involved are in jail. And we're not being charged $6,000 a day to keep them in jail. We're just throwing them in any old county jail where we have room, and we're keeping them on bread and water. Now, does this sound good to the rest of you who have suffered through this worthless pandemic? Who've lost family members, who've lost babies, who've suffered all sorts of oddball, untreatable, disgusting health problems, paralysis, all sorts of other things, the destruction of your immune system, so many other harms. Do you think that the NIH should be totally destroyed? That it should not exist? That all the money that they have should be confiscated and rolled back into the public treasury immediately? I do. Do you think that the CDC should have its charter pulled by the state of Georgia so that it can no longer operate? Do you think that all of these corporations that have been using and abusing our land because they seized a land title and tried to use that against us, the actual owners, do you think that they should go down? It's time, folks. It's time that we took up our swords of truth and our absolute paramount right to destroy these corporations and to kick them out of our country at the very least. Even if we can't destroy Bayer, even if that remains the responsibility of the Pope and the German people, we can sure as hell kick it off our land and soil and forbid it to ever come near us again. And these are the kinds of actions that have to be taken by the living people against the corporations, and it needs to start now. So as we are going forward into January of 2023, I want all of you to be thinking about How to destroy corporations. There are many, many, many ways that you can attack a corporation, and it's totally legal. You can do whatever you want to a corporation. Isn't that convenient? That's something that our enemies recognized many years ago, and that's why they tried so hard to incorporate each and every one of us. That's how they got away and excused themselves for the draft in the First and Second World Wars and Korea, by treating people as things. Well, now it's time for the revenge of the people on the things. And it's long overdue. So let's look in the current arsenal. Let's look at the Sherman Antitrust Act. Most of these things are organized as trusts at some level or another. They've tried to protect their money, their profits, their war chests, their corporate war chests are in trusts. Let's look at the antitrust law. Let's look at all the anti-monopoly legislation. Let's dig into corporations and commercial corporations and exactly what they have to do to remain in business. And then let's selectively just pull the plugs. And meantime, I'll get on my broomstick. Yeah, the Rothschilds call me the Witch of the North. And I will start looking into exactly which principles are responsible for which corporations, and we will target them. Okay? So part of what actually moves the world is exposure to the public view. The only way that you ever make anybody responsible for anything is by exposing them to the public view. So, who really is responsible for Monsanto?
The people.
We can dig it up. We can find out within a gnat's eyelash who chartered Monsanto. What franchise does it belong to as a franchise? Who are its board members? Where are its corporate headquarters? Under which law does it stand? We can dig up the information on these corporations, and then we can use that information to pinpoint public awareness on their owners and operators. And believe me, a lot of this is going to come back to you being the owners. And you're going to be standing there going, what? We own 80% of this Fortune 500 company, and we own 900, out of 1,000 stock certificates for this Fortune 500 corporation. And again, you may be looking at a situation where, in effect, you're hurting yourself in a certain sense. You're saving your lives, but you may be hurting your financial position simply because these men who've been in the middle have been making tremendous profits off of your assets. And they've been spending your money on stock shares in all these corporations that are running amok. So when we take something down like AT&T, yeah, the public does suffer somewhat, but they gain. They also gain. And when it's your life on the line, and when you're not getting your share of the stock certificate value anyway, who cares? I don't have to care about the middlemen. They've done me no favors. They've come in and bought things using my money and my name. They've made a lot of profit on it, but they haven't shared a penny with me. So why do I care if they go down the drain and go to jail? They deserve to go down the drain and go to jail. Sorry. Those are the facts, ma'am. And a lot of these corporations have done this for decades and decades and gotten away with it. And they think they're going to get away with it forever. And the evil men who are running these corporations think that they are going to get away with it forever. The vaccine corporations went so far to claim that Congress had given them a carte blanche, that they could do anything they wanted with vaccines and not be held accountable for it. The Congress offered to hold them harmless. And the way this happened is that they were getting all these lawsuits because they were producing all this crap. And it was creating all sorts of problems. Kids were getting sick. Parents were suing. And so they went to Congress and said, well, we're going to stop making vaccines because we're getting too many of these successful lawsuits. And Congress said, oh, no, don't stop making vaccines. We're going to stand good for you. We'll hold you harmless. You can do whatever. You don't have to worry. And so all of these vaccine manufacturers took that literally and thought that they could get away with this. They thought that they were going to kill all these people and maim all these people and generate all sorts of business for themselves for the next 50 years. And these other scumbags were going to try to claim you as GMO property owned by the patent holders, right? They scheme all this stuff up. They think they're indemnified, and guess what? They start to hang. They start to get picked up and executed. And they're very surprised. Well, wait a minute, you can't do that to me. Congress held me harmless. Well, whoopie-doo. Where's Congress? Line them up too. They have no right to do this. They have no money of their own to contribute. Unless you want to count Nancy Pelosi and the other crooks that have become millionaires selling us out to other countries and other cronies. No. People who think that Congress had the ability to hold those pharmaceutical companies harmless need their heads examined. And so do those CEOs. At least have their heads examined before they're whacked off. But you know, when you've got people who are out there in this dreamland who think that cow farts are more important than billions of pounds of pesticide being spread on the land every year, and think that, you know, the breath you exhale can't be absorbed by the plants, you're dealing with people in some sort of land of Oz. And I think that is the great take-home message of the land of Oz, is that they're in a different world. They do not see, think, smell, react, believe, or interact with the world that the rest of us live in. They're off there in their la-la land, imagining that whatever they and their little group of friends come up with is all that matters. And that's not all that matters. So while Congress back in the 1980s was scratching the backs of Big Pharma, and Big Pharma was sitting there like a large dog enjoying it, they were in their la-la land. They had completely forgotten about the rest of us. They didn't think that we mattered. And it's up to us to show them that we do. So that's what we're going to do in 2023. That's where we're headed into the new year. But before we get to clearing those decks and doing that research and bringing those actions before the world, there are a lot of other things that we need to deal with. One of them is the Bank of International Settlements. This is supposed to be the clearinghouse for bringing issues about banks and about deposits for the entire world. We're supposed to be able to go to the Bank of International Settlements and say, well, our deposits aren't in the bank where we place them, so where are they? We're supposed to be able to show up and say, okay, we're the owners of these and these and these and these and these and these and these accounts. And here's our deposit slip, and here's our manifest showing the transport, and here's the name of the bank officer that took the deposit. And they're supposed to be able to sort this out. So we're going to be paying attention to the Bank of International Settlements, because that is where it is all coming to push and shove. The courts have been on our side throughout this process, both the international courts and the federal courts here. And the only thing standing in our way is the Bank of International Settlements. So, train your attention on the Department of the Federal Treasury in the Bank of International Settlements. Learn as much as you possibly can about that particular 7-member board of trustees that is supposed to be answering to us, the donors and owners, and aren't. We have got serious problems in this world because small groups of highly motivated people were motivated by self-interest and power-mongering and ego to steal by deceit and fraud from the rest of us. So now let's turn the microscope on the Bank of International Settlements. And I mean that all from around the world. And don't forget that the Joint Chiefs and the chiefs of NATO are primarily responsible for our security, safety, and well-being, and they're not doing their jobs. So keep your eye on them and the corporations operating them. It's going to be a busy, busy time with lots of work for everybody involved.